Digital noise, what is it? How do you get rid of it? What programs can you use to reduce it? We're here with Bob Nagy to talk about these different things with digital noise. Everybody talks about getting the least amount of noise. What can you tell us about digital noise and digital photography?
Well, remember film when we had ASA, which is now ISO, the speed or sensitivity of the film? In the days of film, when they were making film, if they needed to get more sensitivity out of the film, the structure of the grain or the little pieces of silver actually had to be larger to gather more light, and thus the more sensitive the film was, the grainier the film was. And of course now we're in a completely different world with digital, but we still do have noise. And the first thing that contributes to noise in the digital world is the sensor itself in the camera. We have CCD sensors, we have CMOS sensors, and both of them have, although different in structure, both of them make noise. And so we have to look at what can we do about this noise and how does that contribute to the overall product.
Just to interrupt, is there a measurement? Because a lot of people are wondering, gee, you know, if I get my next digital camera, should I get more megapixels seem to be the thing, but is there a noise rating that you should take into consideration? So with something that less noise, less noise and less megapixels is better than more megapixels?
Right. Well, each sensor is going to have a certain amount of noise, or every camera is going to have a certain amount of noise. First of all, you want enough megapixels to represent the picture adequately, because one of the types of noise you're going to come into is having inadequate number of pixels to actually represent the picture with a fine enough grain structure, we could call it, or fine enough gradations, so that it looks good and clean. So really, that's where the megapixels come in. But that's why megapixels are not the only thing. People think, oh, the more megapixels, the better the camera. Not so, because it has to do with the sensor manufacturer and how the sensor is made, and that larger sensors in the cameras produce better picture quality because they can gather more light without having to use more electronic sensitivity to bring up the quality of the picture. But then what do you do about the noise? Okay, as long as you have adequate megapixels, then you're in on that structure. The better the quality of the camera, the lower the inherent noise of the CCD sensor will be, or the CMOS sensor. But in the end, you're going to have some noise in that picture, and it's going to show itself in a couple of ways. First of all, if you don't have enough megapixels to make the picture look good, you're going to see actual dots of color on the screen. That's very rare these days. The main way you're going to see noise is due to the compression of JPEGing. If you have a high compression, make the file very small. The artifacts of this compression are going to make more ambiguity in the selection of colors, especially in large areas of continuous color like the sky, or a large area where it's pretty much small gradations of color. You may see some banding, or you may see some sort of ambiguity in the way that the colors were chosen. Instead of it being nice and smooth, they're sort of a little more blocky.
I see that on my satellite TV sometimes.
That is the compression artifacts. Same thing, same thing. But then what do? Okay, most of these cameras take very noiseless images, but if you're using a high sensitivity and do have noise, there are a lot of third-party routines and programs available to really do away with a lot of noise, especially if you're using the camera to rephotograph, say, old photographs and archiving something like that, and you want to reduce the noise in that. And really, that noise is on the original image and not on your CCD. There are regular software programs like Neat Image or Noise Assassin available, and they are amazing.
They work by themselves, or do they work as a plug-in to Photoshop?
Both are available.
Okay.
Standalone ones are available, plus you can, let me describe the Photoshop part though. Basically, actions in Photoshop are the macros of Photoshop, and people do sell macros or actions in Photoshop for noise reduction for every different type of camera, especially the professional ones out there, as an automated plug-in.
Wow, so you can take an image and yet it gets better later on.
That's right. Good reason to, next year software is better and those same images will actually look better.
So what tips can you give people to reduce noise? Some obvious, not so obvious.
Well, of course, first thing is shoot at the lowest sensitivity you can in your camera. And usually 100 and 200 in most of these cameras has a very similar noise level, so you can usually always get away with shooting at 200 ISO. I would start it there and go up from there. And then, of course, the more light, the more you'll be able to stop down your iris, get a nice wide depth of field, things just look cleaner, and more light's getting in there. So the less that the camera has to sort of amplify the light to make a print, the less noise are going to be in the image. And we engineers call that a signal-to-noise ratio. So lots of light.
And can you look for that signal-noise ratio or that chip size when you're buying the camera?
You cannot get a signal-to-noise ratio, but you can get the chip size. And you'll see that discussed on the boards, on the net, and other places. The larger the chip size in the camera, the larger the sights are of the actual light sensors that gather the light, and the easier it is physically for it to gather the light and make the image.
Well, when I was over at your studio one day, I looked and I said, there's no way you're getting these images out of the cameras you have. Your cameras are great, but I just can't get the same images. And you said, well, I do some post-processing. Anything that you could share with people off the bat that you do?
I can.
Go ahead.
I can indeed. Well, first thing to remember is that most digital cameras have an infrared, we call it low-pass filter, and that is a piece of glass basically in front of their sensors behind the lens to keep out infrared light, which is not necessary to make the picture because you can't see infrared light, but it also has a slight softening effect on the image. And so you want to really resharpen the picture slightly after you've taken it. Almost all digital images out of cameras can use a little bit of sharpening. And remember two things. If you have a program which has sharpening in it, look for unsharpening. Unsharpening mask is the professional way to do sharpening on an image. Not the sharpening filter, but sharpening will work. But unsharpening mask is better.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's not a thing that most people would know. And also that do the sharpening the last thing you do. If you're adjusting the color of the image, cropping it, doing whatever you're going to do to it, the last thing you do is sharpening. And don't overdo it because it's a non-reversible process. You know, it's easy to overdo it, so underdo it a little bit. And then what I do is also save the image separately from the original image. When you're going to sharpen it and crop it and fix it all up, I add a capital E at the end of the file name to mean enhanced, or that I've played with it. And if it's ready for print, especially ready to go to print, and you've sharpened it and resized it, I use an EP. That way you have the original and you've got your processed image.
So you work with all the colors and everything and the contrast, you get it right, you save it, then you use the unsharpened mask
Last thing.
to start playing with it, so if you mess up, you didn't redo all your work.
That's right. And the other thing is, if you're going to bring it down for web use or anything else and really reduce the size of it, do a little bit of unsharpening mask or sharpening the last thing as well. You might have to do it actually again if you're going to reduce the image in size.
Do you find there's anything in the color and contrast, tinting controls, that you can do to subconsciously give people a way to, that when they look at the picture it sort of pops out more?
Sure, absolutely. We are used to overcolor saturations. I'm just saying we as people who watch television, because really the color control in your television, even in the center, has the saturation bumped up a little bit. And we're used to, if you look at that television, you look at flesh tones, that's not the way that flesh tones look in life. They're richer than life. And so we're used to seeing things with a bump of about 10 to 15% color saturation. And I would certainly say do that on your images, unless it looks unnatural.
Right. And then going back to the noise, too much color saturation will probably enhance the noise, too.
Absolutely, especially in the reds. So be judicious, don't overdo it,
Right.
but a little bump goes a long way.
Well, I find working with color controls both in video and digital stills for a number of years, that your first gut reaction is, wow, this is good, this will be better, you know.
Right.
And so you end up having, beginners end up having images that end up having a little bit more noise because maybe they're too sharp, too edgy, and have too much color. So
Right.
I would say, when in doubt, if you think it looks good while you're starting, you'd probably agree to back it off, even
Back
though
it
you
off.
don't think it.
Yeah, I
needs to.
always adjust it the way I like it, and then I back it off just a bit.
Yeah, a little too much of any good spice is a dangerous
That's right.
thing.
Be subtle.
Well, thank you very much. Bob Nagy here with me, John Cooksey, and we're just discussing digital noise, and we'll hope to see you again on another segment.